Okay, good evening. This is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network, and this is the Truth Attack Hour. And yes, that's right. We're back. We're back with the Truth Attack. So, I got a lot I want to get into tonight, so let's just get right into it. We are the Liberty Works Radio Network, and we do need the support of the members of the listening audience to keep the broadcast network operating and the shows coming. So, you enjoy the information, the shows, the topics, and the guests and information that you hear on this network, we sure would appreciate it. If you could find your way over to the LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com website and get signed up as a subscribing member, even if it's as little as $10, $20 a month, every membership helps, and we do need your support to keep the network operating. And if you want to become fully informed on the maladministration of the federal personal income tax by the IRS, the DOJ, and the federal judges, you should find your way over to tax-freedom.com and do some reading, get educated. And if you want the information in hand, you should find your way over to irszoom.com, where you can pick up a copy of The Simple Truth About Income Tax for just $4. You can pick up a copy of the exhibit documents I walk through in the 4-hour lecture on the income tax and its maladministration that I've put up on the Thomas Freed YouTube channel. And you can pick yourself up a copy of the 780-page American Tax Bible for just $50, which is a compendium of 100 years worth of research on what the income tax is and what the income tax is not, concluding with the proof positive provided by Donald Trump's tax change law in January of 2018, where the Congress declared on the congressional record that the constitutional authority for the federal income tax is not the 16th Amendment, which is what the IRS and DOJ and the federal judges have been lying to the American people about for 75 years. It is not the 16th Amendment that authorizes the income tax. It's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. That's the intent and authority declared by Congress in reenacting the exact same income tax law that we've had for 100 years, but they had to rewrite the statute to change the brackets, the threshold rates, and to eliminate the unlimited SALT deduction. So in rewriting the statute, they had to first declare the constitutional authority for the statute on the congressional record before the new legislation could be brought to the floor of the House for discussion and debate as a bill. So now we know absolutely positively that the IRS, the DOJ, and the federal judges of the lower courts have been lying to the American people for 75 years to impose not constitutional taxation in the enforcement and collection of a legitimate indirect impost, duty, or excise, where the tax owed is measured by income, when income is not the object of the tax or the subject of taxation. It's not the direct tax they've been enforcing on all labor and all earnings. It's an indirect tax under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. And the problem, of course, then becomes that none of the Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 taxing powers of impost, duty, and excise, none of those powers reach the labors of the American people with legal effect as a tax. And that's why it's been a fraud since the end of World War II. It's not a direct tax on all earnings. It's not a tax without limitation. It's not a tax on the labors of the American people. It's not a tax that can even be collected from the American people unless they allow it or remain themselves ignorant of the limits of the law and the legal authority to collect the tax outside of the employment relationship, which of course is where the employee's allowance for the withholding of the tax on a W-4 form is required to collect it. Why is your allowance required? Because the tax isn't due until next year on April 15th. It's not due by law when you get paid, it's due by law next year. And nobody can force you to service a potentially future obligation before it's legally due without imposing the prohibited condition of involuntary servitude upon your person. They can't force you to pay it early. They need your permission and allowance in order to collect it from you. And then, of course, they collect too much so that right from age 16, when you start working, you're immediately filing, giving up your Fourth Amendment rights to be secure in your person, papers, houses, and effects, giving up your Fifth Amendment rights to provide no testimony or evidence that may be used against you in a court of law, and turning yourself into a virtual peon, serf, and slave for the rest of your adult life, as they withhold too much and force you to file to get your money back, or at least some of it. So the whole system is a fraud. And as soon as the American people wake up to this, well, that's when you'll start to get some of your freedom back, because right now we don't have a constitutional system of taxation in America. We don't have a constitutional system of taxation in America. We have a system of involuntary servitude and virtual peonage, where the American people are compelled to service the $35 trillion in debt owed by Congress to the Federal Reserve Bank, which is where all of the money allegedly withheld from your paychecks as tax is actually going. It's not going in the Treasury, it's going to the Federal Reserve Bank, a private corporation. Why is a private corporation getting your so-called tax dollars? Because it's not a system of taxation, it's a system of involuntary servitude and peonage. The labor of the American people are being used to collateralize the $35 trillion in debt. And as long as the American people allow their labors to be collectively used to collateralize that debt, you will experience nothing but ever increasing degrees of slavery and involuntary servitude. It's just not a slavery done with whips and chains. It's done with financial extortion and threats of deprivation. Just like the peonage plantation, where if you didn't give unto the master's wishes and turn over the amount of the annual harvest to him, he'd kick you off the plantation and take away your little plot of land, which in today's analogy is your job. So it's not a constitutional system of taxation. It's a system of annual custom and tribute paid to a conquering invader, which was the Federal Reserve Bank, who invaded and conquered America in 1913. It was just not a military conquest and invasion. It was a seditious and secret financial invasion and conquest when they took over the monetary system rather than the military system. And they've manipulated the currency and our society behind the scenes ever since. First, during the Great Depression, to seize control of the millions of farms that were bankrupted out and conglomerated together to create 6 corporations that now collectively control the food supply in America. It used to be provided by millions of small farms, but depression made sure they got rid of the small farms and consolidated all of those operations into, as I said, collective operations of what now are 6 major corporations that control the food around the planet. And now, looks like they're working on trying to take over energy as well as the world's resources. And I've said before, that's why we're at war with Russia. Putin won't let the global elitists use the natural resources in Russia to take over control of the world. And the global elitists have reached the point that with China on board, the US on board, do the liberal politicians at least, if they could get the natural resources of Russia, they could control the world. And Putin's in the way, so they want him out of the way. But at the same time, they don't want too much of the natural resource production disrupted. So Biden has told the Ukrainians they can't attack assets in Russia like the oil and so forth, because that would mess with the price of oil and he'd be sunk in the re-election. So the Ukrainians are stuck with an endless artillery battle on their home soil that They're not allowed to fight and attack Russia, and they just have to sit there and watch themselves die and their country be bombed into oblivion because Biden won't let them wage war on Russia. Because he's a coward. And I've said it over before. He's a bald-faced coward. He runs away from reporters. He runs away from questions. He runs away from the American people. He runs away from the stage. And when he talks, he doesn't. He just mumbles and stumbles and turns and runs away. The picture of Biden, history should remember, is that bald head walking off behind the curtain. That's all this man does. Absolutely sick. Absolutely sick. Okay, freedom comes from God, not government. And the truth shall make you free. God's true plan for mankind is freedom through the pursuit of truth and the faith in God. If you misplace your faith in any other entity, person, institution, party, philosophy, your faith will be used against you to betray you and enslave you to whatever entity you have misplaced your faith in other than God. Only God delivers freedom. Everybody else wants obedience. Anything else wants obedience. So here we are. As goes the currency, so goes the fate of the nation, and they are printing it into oblivion, aren't they? Well, Joe Biden now says, moving on to current events here, Biden says that he's going to let the Trump tax cuts expire. At the same time, he's saying that he still promises not to raise the taxes on anyone making $200,000. This guy is such an idiot, such a moron, so out of touch with reality. He doesn't understand that letting the Trump tax cuts expire will cause everyone to pay a higher rate of tax, at least by 3%. 12 goes to 15, 15 goes to 18. Every single bracket's rate goes up, and the amount of deductions you can take goes down. So every single person in America will be hit with a tax increase. And this idiot is bragging about it because he thinks the American people are so stupid, they actually believe the Democrats' false claim that all the money in the Trump tax cuts went to the wealthy. No, they cut the brackets across the board. Every single bracket got a break. It's actually arguable that it's the lower brackets that got a bigger breaker than the higher brackets. But the Democrats have, of course, been yelling exactly the opposite, and they think we're so dumb that we've bought into it. So now he thinks that we're going to support him raising taxes on everybody in the country, including those under $200,000, while he lies about not doing that. Just like he lied about not raising taxes before and then hit everyone with the energy tax that caused inflation because he attacked the energy industry, shut down the pipeline, turned off the leases, turned off the permits, caused the price of gasoline to become less affordable, shall we say, to be nice. And of course, that increased energy cost cascaded into the cost of every product and every shelf and every store and every county and every city in America. Of course, energy is everything. It's in everything. It's in the production, it's in the manufacture, it's in the distribution, it's in the purchase, it's in the storage, it's in the display, it's in the store, it's in the cost of getting to the store. Energy is everything. Biden delivered this inflation intentionally. He intentionally drove the price of energy up, knowing, well, actually, maybe he's that stupid. Maybe he didn't understand that energy is in everything and driving it up wouldn't force you to electricity. It would just make life unaffordable and destroy the quality of life for most of the middle class in America. Okay, I think I hear the first commercial break coming up. I spent the whole time talking about the federal income tax problems. We'll get back for more current events in 5 minutes after these commercial breaks. Get on over to libertyworksradionetwork.com and get signed up as a subscribing member. Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. We're back to continue with the show. And as I was concluding there in the first break, I was pointing out that Biden is simultaneously telling the American people he's not going to raise taxes on anyone making over $200,000 and that he promises to let the Trump tax cuts expire, which means he'll be raising taxes on everyone, including those making less than $200,000. So I think the question is he really that stupid? Or is he just lying his ass off to the American people? Guess you'll have to make up your own mind on that, but I kind of think it's a whole lot of both. Okay, what else do we got happening in the news? Well, they went ahead today and they had the Supreme Court hearing about whether or not Trump has immunity in the DC case relating to the January 6th claim that he fomented the insurrection, which of course is nonsense. The video shows him telling the people to march peacefully and patriotically to the Capitol to let their voices be heard, and no way at all inciting violence, and in fact urging exactly the contrary. So they had the hearing today to determine whether or not, and this occurred when Trump was still president on January 6th, before the January 20th change of power. So the Supreme Court agreed to hear arguments on whether or not there was immunity possessed by Trump for those actions. And the way the hearing went, both sides grilled both attorneys pretty aggressively. It kind of looks like this is going to be 6-3 or 5-4, depending upon whether Roberts plays the liberal or the conservative. I kind of think he's got to go conservative here. Historically, presidents have been given immunity. This is questionable whether this was even a crime or just political desperation seeking some way to find more votes in the state of Georgia. Not illegally, but legally. And, that has been done by virtually every losing candidate since Ronald Reagan. So there's no crime. It's made up. It kind of looks to me, I didn't hear the arguments, but as I said, I read a summary review of them, and both attorneys got grilled by the other side. And I think you have to come down on presidential immunity here. This is over a speech on the Mall and telephone calls. And again, it doesn't hold up as criminal activity. This is normal political activity by a side that's about to lose the election. They do take as many different ways as they can to try and find a way to get some review or some reversal. Gore did it. Bush did it. Obama did it. Clinton did it. It is just not unusual. So I think this looks like a 6-3 that Trump does have immunity in that case. And I've said before, I think he also has immunity in the Florida classified documents case. As president, he has a right to take the classified documents for his presidential library and classify them. They were held in a secure facility under guard at Mar-a-Lago. They put the lock on when DOJ asked for it. They'd already turned over packages. The indictment was engineered. There was never any crime or criminal investigation. They escalated a civil summons that had been refused, and it was engineered to be refused because, I said, in December they turned over a bunch of documents, and they came back in April with the summons that said, give us everything. Give us everything you got left. And they knew Trump would refuse that. They'd already turned over what they were willing to give to them. So when they refused to give them everything else that's left, instead of going to a judge to seek an order to enforce the summons from the civil court where this was proceeding, they immediately switched to criminal and raided Mar-a-Lago without cause over a civil records dispute. So this is all engineered by Biden and his Department of Justice. And it's my feeling Trump has immunity in that classified documents case as well. If there's a dispute, they should figure it out civilly. It's got nothing to do with the criminal court. Okay, so let's move on. They passed a foreign aid bill, and a lot of Republicans are pissed that they basically gave the Democrats their agenda, sending 63 billion to the Ukraine, 61 billion, 26 billion to Israel, and 8 billion to help Taiwan. But they got absolutely nothing to protect or secure the southern border. So this is what the Democrats wanted, was to give money to the Ukraine. And they got everything they wanted, 61 billion to the Ukraine for an endless artillery battle that will still be going on until Trump gets elected, apparently, because Biden has no plan. And he's told the Ukrainians you can't wage war on Russia in Russia. And that's the only thing that's going to bring Putin to the table to negotiate, is when the people of his country start bitching that their lives are being destroyed. At that point, Putin will have to negotiate to settle where the lines are now, most probably. So the Republicans, a lot of people are pissed at Mike Johnson. We'll have to see how this speaker leadership goes from here on out. But a number of Republicans feel betrayed and don't really want him to remain as speaker, or at least they're not going to help him with his stuff anymore since he abandoned them. That's going to make it hard to lead. Of course, with the Democrat Senate under control of Schumer, there wasn't much going to happen anyway, was there? I mean, Biden's been yelling he wants a new border security bill. Well, he's got one. H.R. 2 was passed by the House months and months ago, and it sat there in the Senate under Schumer, who's sitting on it and won't bring it up for a vote in the Senate because that's not the security bill the Democrats want, because it secures the border instead of providing billions more for processing more illegal aliens in, which is what their bill did. It was a process more aliens bill. It wasn't a border security bill. If they want a border security bill, it's right there. It's already there. It's in the Senate. Vote on H.R. 2 and pass it and you get your new law, Joe. What do you say? Oh, no. That's not what Joe wants to do. He doesn't really want new law. He wants more money to process more people, to buy more votes, to pass out more largesse and welfare, not to Americans or veterans or our homeless, but to illegal aliens who have been the recipient of Joe Biden's economic uh, development. If there's, it's been shown the jobs over the last 3 years have primarily been taken by illegal aliens, not American citizens. America on Main Street are struggling. Joe Biden is funding the illegal aliens who he's urging to vote for him and who they're registering to vote in the state elections. But the state elections and the federal elections are all conducted by the state at the same polling place. You don't really think that once an illegal alien is registered to vote, they're not going to go vote in all the elections that occur at that polling place? And no one in these liberal states is going to prevent them from voting because they're going to be registered to vote in the state elections. And they're not going to recognize a distinction between state and federal, even though there is one in the law. So this is the Democrats' plan, is to bring in as many illegal aliens as they can, 10, 11, 12 million so far, to put them in the liberal states that are losing American citizens who are leaving because of the high taxes, the high crime, the high regulations that interfere with good business. So citizens are leaving the liberal states, New York, California, Illinois, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and that means that the Democrats will have less seats in Congress and less electoral votes in the presidential election because both of those things are based on the census count. So if citizens leave, they'll go down in their political power unless they can replace the lost residences. And that's what they're doing. They're bringing in illegal aliens to steal the political power from the American citizens left in those states. Because you got to imagine 2 million illegal aliens in New York City are going to have substantially different interests and demands, politically speaking, than those New Yorkers living in the countryside outside of New York City, all across the rest of the state. And if you look at the state's demographics, politically speaking, you'll see exactly that. It's blue in two places. New York City and Buffalo and Albany. Three little blue points, and the whole entire rest of the state, county by county, is red, with rare exception. So the state is 90% red geographically, 10% blue, but it's 70% blue by population count because of all the people that live in the cities. So New York is a funny demographic, and the Democrats know that if they don't bring in illegal aliens, their political power in those states, which they've controlled for quite some time now, will be diminished. And that's their plan, to avoid diminishment of power, even at the expense of selling out America. And how committed is Biden to selling out America? Well, look at what he's willing to do. He wants boys and men to compete in high school against girls. A West Virginia appeals court recently struck down a new West Virginia law that forbid transgender men from competing in West Virginia women's high school and college athletics, claiming that Title IX protects the civil rights of the men to compete in women's sports, not the civil rights of women to have a safe place to compete in sports. Because, of course, if you let men compete with women, there won't be any women left in the sport eventually, will there? Because they're physically not as strong or as capable or as aggressive. And what will happen is exactly what has been happening. They'll get injured and won't want to play anymore because they're being forced out by the dominant male. So Joe Biden and the Democrats cannot be allowed to change Title IX and use it to enforce an alleged civil right of men to compete against women. Title IX was passed in the 1970s, and the original intent of Congress was to preserve and protect a safe space in sports and provide for a platform for female sports where they wouldn't be injured and abused and dominated by men. The original intent was to protect women, not men who feel like they're women or claim that they're going to be a woman. The rule is original intent, and the determination of whether or not you are male or female isn't emotional, it's scientific. It's based on the scientific biological reality accepted of over 100 years of chromosome uniqueness. And this Title IX argument should ultimately be settled by the Supreme Court under this original intent to protect females, determined by the biological science of chromosome, which means XX and you can compete. XY chromosomes, go compete with the men. Go compete with the men. You can compete. Everybody has the right to compete. That's correct. Nobody should be locked out. Nobody should be told they can't compete. XX, you can compete in the girls' divisions. XY, of course, you can compete in the men's division because you're a biological man. And no matter how you feel, no matter how strong your emotions are, you're not a girl. You're a man. And your civil right says that you can participate in sports with the men or the boys, not the girls. You don't get to go dominate and intimidate the girls because you can't do that with the boys. That's not the way it works. Biden and the Democrats cannot be allowed to change Title IX. This is insanity. It's literal insanity. An alternate reality that they're making up out of emotional what? Emotional what? Who knows? Emotional dysphoria, confusion, inability to process reality. It's all of these things. It's just crazy. Okay, I think I hear the next commercial break coming up. So again, I want to urge the listeners to find their way over to the LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com website. Get signed up as a monthly subscribing member. Find your way over to IRSZoom.com and recommend to anyone that needs help answering IRS correspondence that they go over to that website and pick up a copy of the letter to answer the IRS correspondence they've received. Huh. Well, it's someone who's not very secure. It's someone who's emotionally confused, and it's someone who's been listening to other people that are intentionally trying to use no, no, of course, it's insane. It's hard to imagine, right? I mean, if you were in that position, you'd feel guilty, right? I mean, yeah, no, right. Get away from me. Get away. No, no, it's more like it's more like get away from me. Oh, it's absolutely insane. It really is. And we see the results through this Leah Thomas person who, as a man, was like ranked 300. 300. He couldn't make the top 10. He couldn't make the top 10. No, well, no, change my claim to participation rights because no, right. Is there it's a third chromosome? Uh, no, right. If she's XY, that's bullshit. Absolutely correct. Agreed. Agreed. If it's XY, if it uh, no, agreed. If it's XY, you got nothing to say. As long as it's XY, you got nothing to say. Other than other than Secretariat. Substantially large, which is that's why I could win the Belmont by 32 lengths. Do you realize? Do you realize that horse set the record for all three Triple Crown races, and no horse has ever run faster. He still holds the track record in all three races. Fifth genetic, absolutely, 1 in a billion. One in a billion. 1 in a billion. Okay, this is Thomas Freed. Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour, and let's just get right back into it. So, inflation is coming back. The price of oil has gone back up and doesn't look good. The markets are taking some hits on the news today that the GDP is fallen substantially to like 1.5. It was anticipated to be like 2.5, so the 1.5 is a big number. Both markets took a hit and probably will go further. The inflation number is a baked statistic. As I said before, when it was running at 9, that it was really running at 19. And today, when they say it's running at 3.5, and they'd like to see it get to 2, it's not really running at 3.5. They've got at least 10% of the number hidden because it's out of the statistic. Do you realize that the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which is the statistical collection and average of pricing that determines the inflation rate, from which the inflation rate is determined and calculated, the CPI no longer has food or gasoline in the index as items that are considered to be part of the inflationary problem in America, or inflationary reality in America, whatever it may be. Food and gasoline aren't in the CPI. But food and gasoline are the most basic things that people have to buy every day, every week, every month, all year long in order to survive. They should be the things that the CPI is based on, not the things that aren't included in it. Because, of course, if you look at the price of gasoline, the inflation rate is running at more like 50%, not 3. And if you look at the price of food, inflation is running more like 20 to 25%, not 3. So the inflation number is a baked statistic. And all of this high cost and increase of products and fuel and energy has created the reality today where Biden is bragging about Bidenomics, which have all the benefits of which have gone to illegal aliens, not the citizens, because on Main Street, 20 million people can't afford to eat anymore because of the high cost of food and gasoline. They have to choose between paying for fuel to get to work or being able to eat a whole meal at the evening when they get home. And the inflation's only running at 3.5%. What a bunch of lying frauds. Lying frauds. And they can't do anything about it because if they raise the interest rates, that's just going to cause a depression, which is being caused right now anyway. Main Street is shutting down with the inverted yield curve, which means that the short-term rate that banks borrow at is higher than the long-term rate that they lend at. And that means they're not lending because they lose money on every loan they make. And when you lose money on an activity, you stop doing it. So loans are being denied to Main Street. But in a debt-based economy, you constantly need a new supply of money being introduced through the bank's lending because every single month you have a further diminishment of the supply and currency available as the debts that can be serviced are serviced. And those debts, that money is then removed from circulation. Once the debt's paid off, it goes off the books. So you need to create new money in order to continue to be able to service all of the existing and outstanding loans. And as the money supply dries up from a lack of capital lending by the banks, because they lose money when they lend, as the capital dries up, people begin to panic. They start to hoard the money that they have. They make a run on the bank to make sure they can get their capital out. And what happens is you get a depression era attitude of hysteria and fear, where the hoarding of the currency even further reduces the availability of currency and circulation to conduct daily transactions. And ultimately, you end up with exactly what happened in the Depression. People standing in line begging for food because not because there wasn't any work to do or that needed to be done, but because there was no money in the possession of the companies to hire people to do the work. If you're going to run a debt-based economy, you have to have an adequate supply of capital in circulation. And when the banks stop lending, that begins to fall apart. And it doesn't impact the wealthy for quite some time, as we see right now, right? Wall Street is booming with $5 trillion on the sidelines, still trying to push a market higher when it's already too high. Every time it falls a couple hundred points, the capital on the sideline sees a buy-in opportunity. Oh, there's a drop, let's buy in. Oh, there's a drop, let's buy in. Based on what? The earnings outlook is terrible. Even though earnings are going on right now, retail and sales are shutting down because that's the first thing that happens when capital goes into short supply in a country as people gradually start monitoring their consumption and only buying those things that they have to have, only in the quantities that they can, and only at the stores that are offering the best deals and prices on the product, whether that be in volume at Costco or one at a time at Walmart. Now, the other stores, all the stores, are beginning to see this slowdown of retail and sales, this cautious use of capital, because Main Street is struggling for capital, even as Wall Street is booming. And it portends the destruction of the middle class. As the middle class is pushed down into the lower class, the poor, because of the high cost of living, the high cost of food, the high cost of energy, the high cost of rent, the high cost of utilities, the high cost of transportation, the high cost of vacation, the high cost of virtually everything. So, and as I've said before, the problem, the source of all of this is energy policy. And that's why they can't fix the interest problem with monetary policy, which they've been waiting on now for a year and a half to get some effect from the interest rate changes. But you can't fix a problem caused by energy policy. You can't fix that with monetary policy. You have to fix the energy policy. The only way to terminate the inflation and bring the price of goods back down, at least some, is to restore cheap and plentiful energy. And the only option for doing that right now is to bring carbon back online, finish the Keystone Pipeline, put the plants back up, start the gas fracking, turn the American energy industry back on, start producing, take control of the price of oil and energy around the planet, drive it back down, and let the prices come back down with it as the cost of energy and gasoline are diminished and go back down to what should be $2 a gallon. It's not $2 a gallon because Joe Biden is trying to force you to give it up. There's no alternative. He's not putting in place the electrical grid to sufficiently provide a grid that could support an electrification transformation of the nation. And if the Democrats and liberals were serious about that green electrification, the first thing they would be doing is building a nuclear power plant in every single state in the country to provide the grid platform that provides the cheap, plentiful electricity to electrify the country. But that's not what they're trying to do. What they're trying to do is put the government in charge of the utilities. Because if you take away carbon and gas and oil, the price of the utility is going to go up. The amount of electricity available is going to go down. The utilities are eventually, as we're already seeing in California, not going to be able to produce the electricity necessary for the people on the grid. And they'll have to run brownouts and blackouts. And the more that the utility companies have to run brownouts and blackouts, the more the liberal progressive radicals will be yelling and screaming for the state government to step in and take over the utility grid because the private utility operators aren't able to manage it sufficiently. And they're not able to manage it sufficiently because the federal government, the state government took away the economic and efficient option and forced them into a situation where shortages were guaranteed. And shortages, of course, result in price increases. But the government knows if they can control energy, they can take absolute control of every aspect of our society. That's why the federal government isn't supposed to be involved in energy. It's not in the Constitution. It's strictly a state function. If California wants to drive its energy through the roof, you don't think that's good, but let's see what the people in California think. If Texas wants to drive the price of oil down and produce as much as they can, the federal government's got nothing to say about it. Each state should be able to manage their grid according to their preferences and should not have a federal dictate or mandate or dictum or dicta imposed on the private operation of the company in producing energy. Gas is going to be cheaper in Pennsylvania. Coal is going to be cheaper in West Virginia. Solar works in California. It won't work in North Dakota. It won't work in Maine. Each locale must decide for itself what form of energy best suits that state's population's capabilities and natural resource fits, whether it's in their own state or the next one. So the Democrats' plan is not to electrify the nation. It's to seize control of the utility grid state by state, starting with the liberals, which would point to California and New York, which is where you'll see that problems develop first, as we already are. And I've said before that Biden is just out there buying loans, buying votes. He's buying votes of the students by forgiving student loan. He's buying votes of the far left radical brown shirt wing of the Democrat Party who have now taken over the campuses and colleges around the country in support of the Nazi philosophy of getting rid of Israel and killing all the Jews, which most of them are too stupid to realize that's what they're actually supporting, because Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, these are the new Nazis on this planet. They're the ones talking about eliminating Israel and killing all the Jews, and that is as Nazi as it gets. You may want to deny it, but it's true. And now we see that Joe Biden has lost control of everything. He's lost control of energy. He's lost control of the price of gasoline. He's lost control of the price of food. He's lost control of the southern border. He's lost control of the Ukraine battle. He's lost control of his own political party, which has now been taken over and co-opted by the far left radical wing. And Joe Biden isn't able to present a moral authority anymore. He's actually courting and supporting the Nazi supporters, the Hamas and Palestinian demonstrations. He's out in New York holding AOC's hand, the communist socialist. He's lost control of his party. He's unable to exert a moral authority and recognize that Israel needs to be supported. Oh, he says we passed a financial aid package for Israel and I'll sign it. Yeah, but you're unable to go out into the street and condemn the Hamas Nazi protests. And make no doubt about it, that's the far left progressive wing of the Democratic Party taking on their brown shirt role, just like they did with the Black Lives Matter protests and riots and looting and arson that tried to destroy all other cities in America. That was your insurrection, and here we see more of it at work on the college campuses, yelling and screaming about the Nazi fascism that they support in getting rid of Israel and stopping them from defending themselves from the amoral attack that occurred on October 7th by the Islamic terrorists that Hamas is. And Gaza has been under Hamas authority for 18 years. Israel walked away from Gaza in 2005. That's been under Palestinian rule since then, and Hamas has stolen everything. Okay, I think I hear the end of the show coming up. This is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. I do again urge you to get over to the libertyworksnetwork.com website and get signed up. I'll be back next week with more. Very good, thank you. That'd be good. Thanks. Bye-bye.